Released in Japan on February 3rd, 2016, with Western releases on March 23rd, 2018 for North America and Europe, and March 24th, 2018 for Oceania, we have Detective Pikachu for the Nintendo 3DS. Developed by Creatures, who had worked on a lot of the Pokemon spin-off games, and published by the Pokemon Company, with Nintendo handling distribution, Detective Pikachu was originally revealed back in 2013. The game originally released in Japan as Great Detective Pikachu, Birth of a New Duo, and featured the first 3 chapters of the game. In January of 2018, it was announced that Detective Pikachu would be an expanded version of the game with 9 chapters as opposed to 3. Shortly after its release in Japan, a petition went up for Pikachu to be voiced by the actor Danny DeVito, and while the petition gained 40,000 signatures, DeVito didn't audition for the role. Detective Pikachu is also getting a film adaptation starring Ryan Reynolds as the voice of Detective Pikachu. Detective Pikachu is an adventure game, and the game places you in the role of a young man named Tim Goodman who had recently arrived in Rhyme City to search for his missing father. Tim comes across a talking Pikachu which only he can understand, and together they tackle mysteries surrounding the Pokemon in the city while trying to piece together what had happened to Tim's father. The game features sections where Tim and Pikachu will walk around investigating clues and gathering testimonies from people and Pokemon alike to solve the problem at hand, as well as solving puzzles. The game also features quick-time events during some of the game's action scenes, requiring the player to press A at the correct time, or rapidly press A to do things. Having Pikachu around is a great advantage to Tim when gathering information from Pokemon, as Pikachu is able to communicate with them. But is this game any good? Find out in The Good. I found the game really works well at showing the interactions between Pokemon and people in their day-to-day lives, as opposed to the traditional catch 'em and battle 'em which the series has been best known for. People around Rhyme City tend to have Pokemon as partners, companions and pets, and I enjoyed seeing what the Pokemon did around the city, whether it was helping out with construction work, acting as willing research subjects, or working for a TV studio. It was fun talking with the Pokemon and seeing things from their perspective, even if they weren't really related to the case at hand. You can also tap the Pikachu image on the bottom screen of the 3DS to get Pikachu's thoughts on the case, his interactions with some of the Pokemon, or random detective tips, coffee tips, and general nonsense. And admittedly, I did enjoy some of them too. If you have the giant Detective Pikachu amiibo, you could also use it to unlock all the story related shorts with Pikachu, providing that you've completed the case. The game's visuals was another thing I quite liked. The expressions and things Pikachu could do were quite impressive, and I also enjoy how Pokemon and people can still carry on doing things in the background while you're investigating. Rhyme City and the areas you visited looked good, and while there were a couple of instances of clipping, I found that they were very minor. A lot of care was taken with presentation, and it really shows what the 3DS is capable of. I also like the game's storytelling. I'm a fan of mysteries, and detective games are right up my alley. As Tim and Pikachu solve cases regarding Pokemon randomly getting violent, they soon find that there's certainly much more to things than people had initially thought. The pacing of the story I felt was good, and coupled with the banter between Tim and Pikachu, made the game enjoyable. While I can't say I'm a huge fan of quick-time events, I felt that they weren't used too often and added to the interactivity of the story. However, there's always more to a game than its good aspects, so let's look at the not so good with the bad. The game I felt was far too easy. There were no penalties for getting deductions and quick-time events wrong, and the game encourages you to gather every single piece of information, even if you have it all figured out. I felt this dragged out a lot of sections in the game, and the 4th chapter in particular, you'll find yourself going backwards and forwards through several areas just to talk to people about certain topics or ask them questions. I will accept that the game was tailored for younger audiences, but perhaps something like an additional difficulty level where you can potentially get a game over, or forcing you to restart from a certain point for failed quick-time events, or making certain incorrect deductions would have been a nice option. Thankfully, at certain points in the game, Pikachu would ask you if you wanted to head straight to an area, and you'll instantly make your way there. I also found that the game did over-explain some things to you, but again, I'll put that to the audience that this game was aimed at. Another thing that you can also put to the audience that this game was aimed at were some of the puzzles. While there were some pretty valid ones, such as finding a certain warehouse and narrowing it down which area it was in based on testimony and evidence, there were some that were far too simple. A good example of this is in the 3rd chapter of the game, where you need to help a researcher at a lab create the colour orange, which really does make you wonder. The game does have its share of trickier mysteries, but the over-explaining I mentioned earlier tends to make sure that you don't get too stuck. The game's easy mode also provides additional hints, however once you pick a difficulty you're locked into it. Other than that, there's not much else to talk about, so it's time I give the opinion. At the end of the day, I did enjoy my time with Detective Pikachu. The game certainly showed some insight as to how people and Pokemon interacted on a day-to-day basis, with the game showing this in a visually pleasant manner. Combine that with the story and it makes for some hours of fun, even though it may seem a little short. The game can be beaten in one sitting. The game does have its shortcomings, being somewhat too easy by holding your hand for a majority of the way, and not punishing you for getting things wrong, but that and some of the simplicity of the puzzles can be put back to who the game was aimed at. While this may alienate some older players, I feel the story does somewhat make up for it, and if there is to be a sequel, I'm all for it. If you like Pokemon games and a good mystery, then I'd say this game is worth picking up. Though the amiibo, for what it's worth, I would pass on for the time being unless you want it for collection's sake, as it doesn't offer much when used with the game. So with that, it's time for my rating. Detective Pikachu gets a flat white coffee out of 10. It's coffee, but not hardcore enough to earn the rating of black coffee. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.